We're not saying free Britney, we're saying Joost Klein has been freed. That is after the prosecutor's office in Malmö, Sweden, said that there was not sufficient evidence to prove that he had deliberately, with intention, harassed a photographer at Eurovision. The case is closed. Our man is free. Should we talk about it? Let's do this! Now, we're not going to go back into the nitty-gritty of what allegedly happened, but a very long story made short is that the European Broadcasting Union excluded Joost Klein, disqualified the Netherlands from the Eurovision Song Contest 2024. In a statement on the day of the grand final, they said, the Dutch artist Joost Klein was disqualified from the grand final of this year's Eurovision Song Contest following threatening behavior directed at a female member of the production crew. A very serious allegation. In the days that followed, the Dutch broadcaster spoke out. They said, quote, an incident occurred after last Thursday's performance. Against clearly made agreements, Joost was filmed when he had just gotten off the stage and had to rush to the green room. At that moment, Joost repeatedly indicated that he did not want to be filmed. This wasn't respected. This led to a threatening movement from Joost towards the camera. Joost did not touch the camerawoman. This incident was reported, followed by an investigation by the EBU and police. Over the summer, Joost Klein reiterated he did not intend to harass anyone. And now the prosecutor's office in Malmö has agreed. This is what Fredrik Jonsson had to say. Quote, today I have closed the investigation because I cannot prove that the act, shoving the camera we assume, was capable of causing serious fear or that the man had any such intention. Now, intent matters in these cases significantly. As Elle Wood said in Legally Blonde, there is a complete lack of mens rea, which by definition tells us that there can be no crime without vicious will. Joost did not deliberately harass anyone, according to police. The senior prosecutor elaborated more to the Swedish newspaper Aftonbladet. He said, it was confirmed that there had been a movement towards the film camera by the accused and that the movement hit the film camera, but for it to be an unlawful threat, I would have to assume that his intention with that action was to induce serious fear towards or simply threaten her. Based on the situation, which was a quick sequence of events in a special situation, I cannot sufficiently prove that he did it to threaten her. I can't conclude anything other than the intention was to influence the filming. He simply didn't want to be filmed. And this takes us back to what the Dutch broadcasters said on the day, or a few days later. They said that agreements had been made beforehand that he was not to be filmed. So as the prosecutor concludes, he was likely trying to push the camera away, not threaten or harass anyone. Now, Joost has spoken out about all this. In a heartfelt post on his Instagram, he had this to say, quote, the last couple of months were terrible. Even though I love to perform anywhere around the world, something didn't feel right. Why did we have to wait so long for an answer? Every day I felt insecure, whilst I knew the truth. There is no case against me because there never was a case. We should all take care for each other. We should all support each other, and we should all come together. Companies just want to protect their money, and they tried to use me as a shield, a village against the city. Guess what? Love always wins. Trust the process. Even though I lost all hope, we back now, baby. Album mode, all caps. Now, the EBU has responded to all of this. Jean-Philippe de Tinder, the EBU's Deputy Director General and the Director of Media, said, quote, the EBU aims to ensure that the Eurovision Song Contest is a show for everyone. It is a safe place for staff, artists, guests, and fans. Like all responsible employers, we do not tolerate inappropriate behavior and will always respond to any workplace issues that are reported to us. The decision to disqualify Mr. Klein from this year's event was made in strict accordance with the Eurovision Song Contest rules and governance procedures after an internal investigation. In parallel, Swedish police decided to open a formal investigation into the conduct of Mr. Klein during the dress rehearsal, which we understand was closed today without further action. This was an investigation into whether a criminal act was committed and not whether Mr. Klein behaved inappropriately and breached ESC rules and procedures. This new development, therefore, does not have any impact on our decision, which we stand by completely. So the EBU is saying today's ruling by Swedish police means nothing to them because they were not concerned about criminality. They say they were concerned about workplace behavior. Now, I would kind of zoom out. In this statement, they say, like all responsible employers, we do not tolerate inappropriate behavior. Now, that is a fair point, right? You have to protect your employees. And frankly, they were probably worried that they might be subject to litigation if they didn't protect their employee. However, don't they also have to protect the artist? And with that in mind, I would point back to the statement from the Dutch broadcaster and indeed to statements from Joost Klein's own lawyer. Joost Klein's lawyer said this over the summer. As I understand it, there was an agreement between him, Joost, and the management. It was a sensitive occasion where he would not be photographed when he left the stage. He was to be met by his team, but there was a photographer. He asked the person to stop filming, but according to Joost's lawyer, the photographer did not stop filming. Then Joost pushed the camera away to remove it. So in this instance, the EBU should look at itself and say, did we do enough to protect the artist who are also here, in effect, working for us? It may not be contractual, like they're not paying him, but he's contributing to the show they're producing.
Can I just pause and flag the fact that when the EBU started shutting down the media center and downsizing, there was this argument that they were protecting artists from fan media. There was this perception that, they wanted to keep things under wraps, maintain privacy so artists, wouldn't face extra pressure. Well, it would seem, according to Joost Klein's team, that the pressure actually comes from the EBU. Because why should you have cameras on you backstage? When you have an active, lively press center, artists can choose to go to the press center or they can choose to go backstage. And backstage should and could be very private for them to recuperate. So it would seem one stressor backstage is actually the EBU.
So in effect, it really feels like on the day of the grand final, the EBU was assuming, it really does feel like they assumed Joost Klein was in fact guilty of outright harassment, and therefore they disqualified him because they didn't want this burden if he was, convicted or whatever. They didn't want to have the narrative be, oh, the EBU allowed a criminal on stage. Now, obviously, we don't know what happened in the room at the time. Miraculously, there is no footage at what is one of the most, filmed events in the entire world. And so I have no doubt that the photographer did feel harassed. And you have to respect their feelings. They did feel something, and that's why they reported it. We weren't there. We cannot know what happened. However, it really does seem there's a lot of cross-cultural confusion here. Like, people express themselves in different ways. And, let's just say it's a Dutch person. Dutch people are very direct, right? Joost Klein is very direct. Say the photographer was a British person. British people tend to be less confrontational. Swedish people tend to be less confrontational. I'm not across the details of the photographer, but it seems like the EBU could have mediated this in different ways. Rather than instantly expelling Joost Klein after this internal investigation, you could have respected both parties by saying, look, we don't actually know what happened, so we're going to keep them apart. We're not going to force them to interact with each other, and we're going to have a long-term investigation. Will involve the police, who clearly have done a more exhaustive job because they interview people from various sides of the issue, including Dutch people, I believe, because the Dutch team insisted that Dutch witnesses also be interviewed. So rather than rushing the process, they could have taken their time and in the meantime allowed Joost Klein to perform, and the two parties would never have seen each other. And if he was found guilty, fine him up the wazoo. In any case, that's all done. We can't rewrite history, but what we can do is take a look at some statements from the Dutch broadcaster and those affiliated with the Dutch Eurovision production, because this means a lot to them. Dutch fans were hurt, Joost Klein was hurt, the broadcaster had spent all this money and did not get the bang for its buck because they couldn't even participate in the end. This is AVROTROS, the Dutch broadcaster. They say, quote, "We have also just learned that the criminal investigation against Joost Klein has been suspended by the Swedish Public Prosecutor's Office because there is no evidence of criminal conduct. From the beginning, we have said that this disqualification was unnecessary and disproportionate, and so it now appears to be. We are still deeply disappointed that the Europapa adventure of Joost Klein and of the entire Netherlands was brutally ended in this way. The next step is to have a meeting with the EBU management about this matter at very short notice. Okay, they are not playing games. The statement goes on. This meeting will focus on this unjust disqualification. We will also discuss all our other objections about the course of events behind the scenes at the song contest that we previously sent to the EBU in a comprehensive letter of objection, which to date has remained unanswered. AVROTROS's approach is and remains that the song contest is about artists and their musical message. The ball is now in the EBU's court. And I want to give a special shout out to Cornald Maas, the Dutch Eurovision commentator. This is what he had to say. The decision of disqualification cannot be reversed, and the chance of a high ranking has been stolen from us. Although the EBU has its own regulations, the decision was disproportionate at that time. The heaviest punishment was used for something that still had to be proven. This is also supported by this statement from the Swedish Public Prosecution Service. It is now the EBU's turn. What are they going to do to accommodate the Netherlands somewhat? Because you cannot fully accommodate them. The show is over. This man lost, a top 5 placing. Let's face it, this was going to the top 5. And it was also at a critical juncture for him. He had been working through a lot of emotional issues. The song was very personal about his parents. And in the middle of all that, in that maelstrom, he got kicked in the shins, basically. Now, I put out a shout out on Instagram asking our Instagram followers about the future. What should happen next? And you guys, you sent in hundreds of messages. I cannot post all of them here, but I can share a few common themes. Alex writes, Joost for the Netherlands in 2025. DeMark says, Joost for the Netherlands 2025, and he's winning the televote. And then Mariel says the Netherlands should be direct finalists next year at least, and they should choose their own position. Now, this is all very good. Let's take this in turn. First of all, the Netherlands has not confirmed for Eurovision 2025. They previously said that they want their questions answered and that they haven't been, and because the deadline to confirm participation is approaching, they may not be there. So, we end up all losing because the Netherlands is a great Eurovision nation, and because of the way they've been treated, they may not want to come back. Because why would you want to, use tax dollars on something and then, frankly, get screwed over, get pulled from the contest? In terms of Joost for the Netherlands in 2025, if they do come back, I'm all about it. He has won over so many fans this year. He would be the media story. He was the media story for the wrong reasons in 2024, and he could be the media story for the right reasons in 2025. Of course, there are some Dutchies who are very angry. Jules Tonglet says, mistakes were made. We should not participate next year as a strong statement. AJ_Neko writes, a public apology from the EBU and maybe a way to make up for the mistake. And then Simon says, EBU to apologize, free participation in 2025 and direct to the final. Now, clearly an apology is not coming because the statement from the EBU, no, there was no warmth to that statement. Sabine says they want for Joost and his team to heal and to get very happy again. I'm not going to read the name on this strand, but some people have said that the EBU disqualified Joost Klein as a way to distract attention from the controversies surrounding Israel's participation. Now, that theory, one, is not stood up, but two, it's giving the EBU way too much credit. Because as we see, they've not really handled communications very well this year. So if they were to have done that, that would have implied some type of strategy. And it seems like, these have been ducks with their legs paddling. So I don't think there was any strategy to this. However, I do think that maybe the stress of the year, the attention, the fact that they were under a microscope because of all the controversies surrounding this year's contest related to Israel, perhaps that gave them sort of more of a motivation to act swiftly and disqualify Joost rather than breathing, kind of assessing more calmly. They could have been very paranoid that they were going to get in trouble if they didn't disqualify him, given the rest of the media landscape. So it's possible that, the stresses of these things are related, but I don't tend to buy a conspiracy theory that this was planned. Because if you had given it any thought, you'd see it was a bad idea to disqualify him. Laura writes, the Netherlands should withdraw for 2025. A lot of you are calling for Martin Oosterdaal to resign. A lot of you are saying that there needs to be new leadership. I don't think people are going to lose their jobs because, as we've seen, they've created new jobs. There was that job advertisement for ESC director. It seems that they want to bring on more people to help manage comms as opposed to taking people away. Oh, I like this comment though. Piccolo Limone, Joost for EBU president. Let's go! And a lot of people say, send the EBU to court. And like many people are making many legalistic statements about people suing, being sued. Like, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but you can understand why people would feel aggrieved. You can understand if people feel their reputation suffered. You can understand if people feel like they lost significant amounts of money. I'd love to see the contract that is signed between, broadcasters and the EBU, like what's promised, what's meant to be given, like what happens in circumstances like this. Yeah, but for obvious reasons, these things have to be kept under wraps. I'm sure the Dutch broadcaster behind the scenes at that emergency meeting that they've called will be addressing all of that and much more. Okay, well, look, I was at work till 8 p.m. and I got to get up for work at 5 a.m. So I'm going to go. We will wrap this up. In the comments, please let us know what you think. Wait, no, let me do that the normal way. Well, that's what I think. What do you think? Do you think that Joost was done wrong by having to wait all this time? Do you think he should have been allowed to participate in the grand final? Where's your head at? What do you want to see happen next year? Let us know here on Wee Wee Blogs. And we'll see you later. Bye!